They often say you're too quiet, that you need to open up more, that you're distant, uninterested, maybe even cold, but what they don't see is what happens beneath your silence. They don't understand the conversations you're having inside your own mind. They can't feel the way your heart reacts to everything around you, even when your face doesn't show it. The world tends to reward the loud, the ones who speak first, the ones who fill space. But you've never needed volume to feel real. You've never needed the spotlight to know who you are. You've always watched more than you spoke. You've always taken time to feel the room, to read the energy, to understand what's going on before you participate. That's never been weakness. That's awareness. And yet, introverts are so often misunderstood. People assume silence means something is wrong. They misread calm as disinterest. They confuse observation with detachment. But what they miss is the quiet power that lives in people who know how to sit with themselves. You don't need to explain why crowds drain you, why small talk makes your skin itch, why you feel more alive in your own space than in a packed room. That's not broken. That's just different. And different is not less. You don't seek attention because attention doesn't fill you. You crave meaning, real connection, depth. You'd rather have one honest conversation than 100 meaningless ones. And sometimes being alone with your thoughts feels more fulfilling than being surrounded by noise you don't relate to. The world can make you feel like you're doing it wrong, that your silence needs fixing, that your pace is too slow, that your preference for quiet is a problem to be solved. But the truth is, the people who move slower often see more. The ones who don't speak first usually speak most wisely. The people who are most still often carry the deepest thoughts. There's strength in not always being visible. There's power in being content without needing to be the center of attention. Introverts don't need to be turned into extroverts to be successful. They don't need to change who they are to be loved. What they need is to be understood, to be allowed to exist without being forced to perform, to be seen for their mind, their presence, their loyalty, their quiet strength. There's nothing wrong with how you move. You think differently, you rest differently, you connect differently, and all of that is valid. This is not about hiding. It's not about staying small. It's about standing firm in who you are, even if it looks different from the world around you. It's about making peace with your quiet nature and honoring it, because being quiet doesn't mean being empty. It means you're full, with thoughts, with feelings, with truth, that you're just not in a rush to prove. You've been listening long enough, and it's time to be heard. On your own terms, in your own way. They called you shy, quiet, strange even. They asked why you don't talk more, why you sit in the corner, why you don't put yourself out there. But what they never asked is what it feels like to watch everything so closely, to think 10 times before speaking once, to prefer silence not because you're afraid to speak, but because you're tired of shallow noise. Being an introvert has never meant being weak. It has never meant lacking confidence. It just means your mind works differently. Your energy comes from within, not from people around you. You recharge in solitude, not in crowds. People often mistake introversion for antisocial behavior, but introverts aren't people haters. They value connection, real connection. They can sit in silence with someone and feel more understood than they do in a room full of laughter. They don't chase quantity, they crave depth. They're not interested in collecting moments for show. They're interested in meaning, in honesty, in feeling something real. That's why small talk feels exhausting. It feels like effort with no purpose. But when the conversation turns real, when it touches something meaningful, introverts open up, not loudly, but fully. You've probably spent years wondering if something was wrong with you. Teachers asking why you don't participate more. Friends joking about how quiet you are. Family encouraging you to be more social. And the worst part isn't the questions. It's the shame that follows them. The sense that being the way you are is somehow a problem to fix. That you must perform in ways that don't feel natural just to be accepted, so you try. You speak when you don't want to. You show up to things that drain you. You fake energy, fake smiles, fake interest, until you're completely depleted. What most people don't understand is that being around others takes energy from an introvert. It's not always about social anxiety or fear. It's about where you pull your strength from. For extroverts, external interaction gives them fuel. For introverts, it costs fuel. A full day around people can feel like running a marathon. That doesn't mean introverts can't enjoy company or be great in groups. It just means there's a price. And sometimes it's too high. The world tends to reward the loudest person in the room, the one who raises their hand first, speaks confidently, takes up space. But volume doesn't equal value. And presence isn't always loud. Some of the most thoughtful, innovative minds sit quietly in the back, watching, listening, processing. Just because someone doesn't speak often doesn't mean they don't think deeply. It's usually the opposite. They're taking everything in. Body language, tone, the words that aren't being said. They see what others miss. Introverts are observers, thinkers, listeners. They're the ones who remember details from months ago. They notice when something's off, even if you don't say a word. They carry emotional sensitivity that doesn't always show, but it runs through everything. They are often empathic, intuitive, emotionally intelligent. Traits that get overlooked because they don't shout them out loud. This inner world is rich, a constant stream of thought, reflection, imagination. Many introverts find refuge in creativity because it allows expression without confrontation. Writing, painting, music, coding, anything that brings clarity through solitude. Some of the most powerful works in art, science, and philosophy came from minds that preferred quiet. From individuals who weren't trying to impress, but trying to understand. People who didn't care to be seen, but to see clearly. But even with all this internal strength, introverts are constantly pushed to become something else, to be more outgoing, more assertive, more visible. Society often assumes that if you're quiet, you're lacking something. But what you're actually doing is preserving. You're conserving energy for what matters. You're choosing your words. You're managing your space. Not every room deserves your voice. Not every situation earns your input. And that kind of restraint, that control, that's not weakness, that's discipline. Many introverts develop the ability to become situationally extroverted, to adapt when they need to perform in meetings, events, presentations, but they pay for it after. It takes recovery. Alone time isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's how they return to themselves. It's how they think clearly again. This isn't about being antisocial. It's about emotional hygiene. It's about peace. There's a quiet confidence in those who don't need to dominate every space they enter. There's power in observing first, acting second. Introverts don't rush to be first in line. They're often the last to speak, but say the most important thing. They're not seeking constant validation. They're seeking alignment within themselves, with others, with their values. What needs to change isn't the introvert. It's the lens people use to view them. Silence is not absence, it's presence on another frequency. And while the world may overlook them, introverts are often the ones driving it forward from behind the scenes, through consistency, through thought, through integrity. They're the ones who show up when it matters, not just when it's loud. You may have spent your life trying to be louder, trying to compete with noise. But now you're learning that your voice matters, even when it's soft. That your presence matters, even when it's still. You weren't made to shout. You are made to listen, to process, to build. You don't need to change your core, you need to understand it. Because once you do, everything else starts making sense, and the world may not always see the full picture, but you will, and that's more than enough. The world doesn't wait to understand you. From the earliest years, it wants you to fit a shape it already recognizes. Loud kids get noticed. Loud kids get labeled as leaders. And the quiet ones? They often get misunderstood. An introverted child isn't broken. They're not hiding. They're just listening more than they speak. But that isn't what most people are taught to value. If you didn't raise your hand first, they thought you didn't know the answer. I'm after what me exist, or I want no part of who I am. If you sat alone during lunch, they thought you were sad. If you didn't want to talk, they thought something was wrong with you. In school, quiet kids are seen as a mystery. Teachers write, brilliant but too reserved, or needs to participate more. The system is built around those who speak fast and loud. Every group project, every oral presentation, every forced icebreaker pushes kids like you into corners. No one sees how much you're thinking. No one sees how much energy it takes just to be around people all day. And when you try to explain it, there aren't words that make sense to them. They don't get that the noise in your head is already loud enough without having to add your voice to it. Growing up introverted can feel like growing up unnoticed, not because you didn't matter, but because the way you exist isn't loud enough for those who don't know how to listen. The class clown gets laughs, the outspoken kid gets praise. You get silence, not your silence, theirs. The kind of silence that feels like absence. The kind of silence that feels like no one is trying to reach you. And you start wondering if there's something wrong with you, if maybe you should try harder to be louder. So you do. You start pretending, laughing a bit too loud, talking when you're not ready, saying yes when you want to say no. You play along because you think it'll help you belong. But it's exhausting. That performance takes something from you every time. You go home tired, emotionally drained, unsure why being social feels like labor. You start avoiding invitations, not because you're rude or disinterested, but because you know what it costs. Even in childhood, you learn to protect your energy without knowing that's what you're doing. You know your limits. You feel them earlier than most. The birthday parties, the group activities, the loud family gatherings. They aren't fun the same way they are for others. You smile, but you're counting the minutes. You speak, but only when it feels safe. You aren't shy. You just aren't loud by nature. The hard part is when people don't ask why. They just assume. They call you rude, distant, moody. Some even call you arrogant, as if silence is always a judgment, as if not speaking must mean you're above everyone else. But it's never about them. You're just thinking, just processing, just observing. Introverts often notice things others miss. Facial expressions, tone changes, subtle shifts in mood. You're tuned in to what's beneath the surface. You don't react quickly because you're still absorbing. But again, they don't see that. They just want speed, responses, volume, noise. Over time, you begin to internalize their view. You think there's something to fix. So you mimic, you mask, you copy those who seem to belong easily. You talk faster, laugh sooner, engage in small talk that feels hollow. But none of it feels right. You leave those moments more disconnected than before, because you're pretending, not because you don't care. but because you're trying to be someone you're not, just to stop feeling, just to stop being too quiet. And then there's the guilt. You cancel plans. You stay home when everyone else is out. You choose books over parties, quiet over crowds, and people notice. They tease you. Or worse, they pity you. Like solitude is a punishment, not a preference. They say things like, "Don't be boring," or "You need to come out of your shell." But you're not in a shell. You're just not loud. You're not distant. You're selective, and no one teaches you that that's okay. The irony is, many introverted kids are emotionally mature before their time. They think deeply. They understand nuance. They're more affected by tone and emotion than most, but they're not given space to speak in their way. They're forced into fast answers and fake confidence. Over time, they learn to stay small, stay quiet, stay invisible, not because they want to, but because they're tired of being misunderstood. Sometimes it's a single teacher or a friend who sees you, someone who doesn't try to change you, someone who doesn't mistake your silence for emptiness, and that changes everything. Even one person who values your pace, your calm, your presence can make all the difference. They don't try to make you louder, they just let you be. And in that space, you start to unfold naturally. You start to feel seen, not for how much you say, but for how much you notice. That's rare, though. Most of the time, introverts grow up feeling like they need to earn belonging by changing themselves. They think connection has to look a certain way, that fast talking and big personalities are the only currency that matters. So they spend years thinking they're flawed, thinking they need fixing. But the only thing broken was the way the world refused to make space for quiet strength. All of that gets carried into adulthood. That early misunderstanding becomes the lens through which you view yourself. You still remember the comments, the stares, the moments you froze up when called on. You remember how uncomfortable it felt to be watched, expected to perform, forced to speak before you were ready. And yet, somehow, you made it through. Not by becoming someone else, but by slowly reclaiming who you always were. Someone who doesn't need the spotlight to feel whole. Someone who thrives not in crowds, but in calm. Someone who was never weak for being quiet, just waiting for the world to listen. Introverts often get misunderstood the moment they go quiet. The silence to many feels like absence, like disinterest. But silence for introverts is not a void. It's a space where thought lives. It's where reflection begins, where awareness sharpens. In a world so focused on volume, it's easy to forget that not all communication needs sound. Not every feeling needs a caption. Not every presence needs to be loud to be powerful. After years of being told to speak up, introverts begin to question if their silence is wrong. Teachers ask them to participate more. Friends ask why they're always so quiet. Interviews punish them for pausing before answering. And slowly silence starts feeling like a flaw. But it never was. It's where introverts think clearly, feel honestly, and process deeply. That pause before responding isn't hesitation, it's respect. For the conversation, for the thought, for the truth. Introverts tend to listen more than they speak. That's not because they have nothing to say. It's because they value what's being said. They're not waiting for their turn to talk. They're absorbing. They're paying attention to what most people miss. Tone, energy, inconsistencies, meaning beneath the words. That kind of listening creates understanding that words alone never will. And it's in silence that this awareness grows. Sometimes, the silence of an introvert is mistaken for coldness. But if you look closely, it's care, it's caution, it's observing before engaging. It's trying to feel safe enough to open up, and when they do, it's real. Introverts don't speak to fill space. They speak when something matters. That's why their words carry weight. They may not start the conversation, but when they speak, it usually hits different because it comes from thought, not impulse. People often think extroverts dominate spaces, and yes, their voices are louder, but introverts anchor spaces. They hold energy. They steady a room. They listen while everyone talks over each other. They give attention instead of demanding it. And in that silence, they build connections not based on sound, but on understanding. Silence can also be protective. For introverts, it becomes a shield in loud environments. When everything is overwhelming, people, sounds, expectations, introverts retreat into silence, not to disappear, but to preserve themselves. They need to be alone to recover, not because they don't care, but because they care deeply. Too much input, too many voices, and their minds get crowded. Silence clears the noise. In that quiet space, creativity is born. Some of the most profound ideas come not in conversation, but in solitude. Many writers, thinkers, artists, and designers sit quietly with their thoughts for hours. What looks like inactivity is actually building something within. That's the thing about introverts. They often create in silence, then share when it's finished. And that's why it's so powerful, because it's not rushed, it's intentional. Introverts notice things that others miss: body language, inconsistencies, tone shifts. They often walk into a room and know who's upset without anyone saying a word. They pick up on details, moods, and undercurrents that slip past louder personalities. It's in silence that these observations grow. It's in silence that their emotional intelligence develops, and because of that, introverts are often the ones who quietly support others without being asked. They're the friend who remembers what you said months ago, the co-worker who senses when you're overwhelmed, the partner who listens more than they talk, but always seems to understand, and yet they rarely take credit for it. Their support is often invisible, and so is their effort, but it's constant, and it's genuine. Silence also gives introverts time to process emotions. They don't react immediately, they need space, time, a moment to breathe. That doesn't mean they don't feel, it means they feel more than they can explain in the moment. And when they're silent, it's often because they're sorting through too much. That inner world can get heavy, and silence is where they start to understand it. Some people assume silence is passive, but for introverts, silence is action. It's mental organization. It's emotional repair. It's a decision not to engage in things that drain them. They may not argue, but that doesn't mean they agree. They may not complain, but that doesn't mean they're okay. Silence can hold protest, love, exhaustion, and awareness, all at once. They're not trying to be mysterious, they're just trying to be real in a world that often rewards noise over depth. And sometimes, being silent is the only way to stay true to who they are. It's not easy to live in a world that measures presence by volume, but introverts carry power in quiet ways. They don't need to be loud to be heard. They just need space, respect, and time, because silence isn't empty, not for them. It's full of everything they never say out loud. Introverts carry their world inside. In that world, thoughts are loud, emotions are intense, and energy is limited. After spending hours listening, processing, and reflecting, social situations can feel like climbing uphill with weights on your shoulders. It's not that introverts dislike people, they just get tired faster from being around too many of them, especially when the interaction lacks depth or meaning. Social exhaustion is not a weakness, it's a response. a quiet signal from the body and mind that says, "That's enough for now." Most people don't see it. They mistake silence for boredom, quietness for rudeness, and solitude for loneliness. But introverts don't need constant chatter to feel connected. They crave presence more than volume. They're not the loudest in the room, but they notice everything. The tone in someone's voice, the shift in body language, the unspoken words between sentences. That awareness takes energy that drains quickly in loud rooms, crowded events, or fast-moving conversations. It starts early, the pressure to participate, to join in, to be more outgoing. School settings reward the loud and penalize the quiet. Speaking up in class, participating in group work, being social becomes a measurement of success. Quiet students get overlooked, even if they're just as capable, sometimes even more. Over time, this creates self-doubt. If everyone else seems so comfortable with constant interaction, what's wrong with needing quiet? That question lingers for years. As adults, introverts carry that same pressure into social spaces. They're expected to attend events, make small talk, smile for hours, stay late. What most people don't understand is how much effort those moments require. The preparation beforehand, the rehearsing of conversations in their head, the emotional load of managing their own discomfort while trying not to seem distant or disinterested. It's exhausting, even if they care about the people involved. Small talk is the hardest part, not because introverts are cold or uninterested, but because shallow interaction doesn't fuel them, it drains them. Surface-level conversation feels like noise. There's no substance to hold on to. They long for depth, for emotional honesty, for connection that feels real. But those conversations are rare, and they don't always happen on demand. So when forced into casual chats, introverts often retreat inward, not to be rude, but to protect their energy. When introverts find people who understand this, they come alive. In the right setting, with the right person, introverts can talk for hours, not about the weather or gossip, but about ideas, emotions, the way life feels. Their words may be measured, but they're meaningful. They don't talk just to fill the silence. They speak to connect. And when they don't speak, it's not an absence, it's presence, in a quieter form. Social media has made this worse. Everyone appears available all the time, always responding, always posting, always online. That kind of constant communication wears introverts down. They feel the need to be available when they're not mentally present. They feel guilt when they don't reply fast enough, even though they're simply protecting themselves from burnout. Being social online isn't easier. It's just another version of being exposed. And exposure is exhausting when you're wired to process things deeply. Relationships can become strained. Friends or family may not understand why an introvert pulls back. They take silence personally. They call it distance. But introverts don't disconnect out of anger or disinterest. They do it to reset, to breathe, to return to themselves. It's never about pushing people away. It's about finding balance in a world that often demands too much. Sometimes, being around people who drain you is more lonely than being alone. Introverts feel that disconnect sharply. They might be sitting in a room full of people and still feel isolated, not because they don't care, but because they don't feel seen. They're not interested in attention. They want authenticity. And when that's missing, they shut down. Not because they're cold, because they're tired. Public spaces can be overwhelming. Bright lights, loud conversations, overlapping sounds. The noise doesn't just affect their ears, it impacts their nervous system. It makes them feel overstimulated, anxious, and cornered. They may leave early or stay quiet the whole time. That's not them being antisocial. It's them surviving the moment the only way they know how, by staying inside themselves until it's over. Introverts often prefer one-on-one interaction, a walk with a friend, a long talk over coffee, moments where the pressure is low and the connection is real. They don't need constant company. They need meaningful connection. There's a difference, and when that's met, introverts can be incredibly loyal, present, and emotionally generous. People often ask, "Why are you so quiet?" as if it's a problem that needs fixing. But they never ask themselves, "Why am I uncomfortable with silence?" Silence is not awkward to introverts. It's peaceful. It allows them to breathe between words, to think before they respond, to feel the space, not just fill it. And in that silence, they listen better. They notice more. They understand deeper. Workplaces often overlook introverts in team settings. Meetings filled with loud voices, fast decisions, and verbal battles. Introverts process information differently. They may need a moment. They may contribute after the meeting, once they've thought things through. That doesn't make them less capable. It makes them precise. But in environments that reward speed over thoughtfulness, introverts can feel pushed aside. Despite all this, introverts aren't fragile. They're strong in ways people rarely recognize. They know how to sit with emotion. They know how to be alone without being lonely. They know how to listen when others just want to talk. That's a rare kind of power. But it doesn't look flashy, so the world misses it. Still, introverts don't need the world's loud approval. They need space, they need respect, and they need time. When given that, they thrive, quietly and powerfully. The world doesn't always notice the power of the quiet ones. While the noise grabs attention, it's often the silence that brings clarity. The previous chapters showed how introverts are misunderstood, labeled, and often unseen in the loud rooms. But what rarely gets acknowledged is the quiet strength they carry. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. Introverts hold a kind of power that builds over time, a force that's not rushed. Their gifts don't explode. They grow, slowly, precisely, deeply. Introverts often have an intense sense of awareness. They notice what others miss. The slight change in someone's voice, the subtle shift in energy in a room, the discomfort behind a forced smile. While others speak, introverts are reading everything else. The unsaid, the body language, the energy. This sensitivity can feel heavy, but it's a strength. It's why people feel safe with them. It's why they're trusted with secrets, because they don't just hear, they listen. And not just to words, to emotion, to hesitation, to what's not being said. Solitude is their sanctuary, not their punishment. And that solitude becomes their creative field. Some of the most brilliant minds of all time did their best work alone. Introverts are often drawn inward, not because they want to escape the world, but because there's something inside them worth paying attention to. That's where ideas come from stillness, from uninterrupted thought. When you're constantly performing for others, there's no space for creation, but introverts carry entire worlds in their minds. That's why so many writers, thinkers, and artists come from quiet corners. They build masterpieces in silence. They also possess an extraordinary ability to focus. When something matters to them, they'll spend hours, days even, learning, crafting, building, practicing. They may not seek the spotlight, but they'll earn it through consistency. This kind of focus isn't easy in a world designed for distraction, but introverts can drown out the noise. They don't chase 10 things at once. They go all in. When they care about something, they don't show off, they show up quietly, repeatedly. Their thinking is layered. While extroverts may process thoughts aloud, introverts often think before they speak. They reflect. They measure their words. This makes their communication sharp, thoughtful, and intentional. When they say something, it matters. It holds weight. Because they're not speaking to fill space, they're speaking to bring value. And while they may not speak often, their words linger long after they're spoken. Introverts don't crave crowds. They value depth, whether it's a conversation, a relationship, or a purpose. They want meaning. They are not drawn to surface-level noise. They want to understand, to connect, to feel. That's why their relationships, though few, are usually stronger. They don't give themselves away easily, but when they care fully, with depth, loyalty, and presence. In professional settings, they are often overlooked at first. They may not speak first in meetings. They may not promote themselves. But they're often the ones who stay late, notice the details, prepare thoroughly, and listen when everyone else is speaking over each other. They bring calm in chaos, structure in noise. Their leadership doesn't rely on charisma. It's built on trust, on consistency, on quietly doing what others just talk about. Introverts are also incredibly introspective. They reflect on their choices, their patterns, their growth. They notice what went wrong and what they need to work on. This internal dialogue, though exhausting at times, is also what keeps them evolving. They don't ignore their flaws. They sit with them. They examine them. And that's how they grow. From the inside out. In conflict, they aren't quick to react. They withdraw, think, and respond when ready. This makes them excellent problem solvers. While others react emotionally or impulsively, introverts take time to see the whole picture. They don't just want to win the argument. They want to understand it, resolve it. They choose peace over drama. This doesn't mean they avoid confrontation. It means they don't waste energy on pointless ones. Another strength lies in their independence. Introverts don't need constant validation. They aren't driven by applause. Their motivation comes from purpose, not popularity. They don't follow the crowd because they were never in it to begin with. That's why they're able to build things others can't. Because they're not distracted by the noise around them. They stay in their lane, and that focus brings results. Many of them are empathetic to a fault. They feel everything. They absorb the emotions around them. This can drain them, but it also makes them deeply understanding. They may not always have the words, but they have the presence, the ability to sit with someone in silence and make them feel seen. That's rare, and it's not taught. It's felt. While others seek attention, introverts often seek alignment between their actions and their values, their relationships and their peace. That quiet alignment, even if invisible to the world, brings them strength. They don't need to be seen to feel valid. They need to feel right with themselves. And when they do, they move forward, quietly, intentionally, powerfully. Introverts carry a quiet fire. It doesn't burn to be noticed. It burns because it's real, and the people who get close enough to feel it know this is not weakness. This is a different kind of power, one that doesn't beg to be understood, one that doesn't ask for permission, one that grows even in silence. Introverts don't love loudly. They love quietly, deliberately, and with more depth than most people realize. After spending so much time understanding their own emotions, they learn to treat others' emotions with care. They're not the ones who fall fast. They fall slowly, intentionally. Every connection takes effort. Every emotion is real. They don't love out of boredom. They don't reach out just to fill space. When an introvert lets someone in, it means something. They may not always say the right words at the right time. They might not be the first to initiate constant affection, but their love shows in how they show up, in how they listen, in how they remember the smallest things you say, even if it seemed meaningless to you. They notice details others miss. They sense when you're quiet for a reason. They can feel the shift in your tone, the weight in your silence, and instead of pushing, they wait. They don't force you to talk. They make space for you to feel safe enough to share. Introverts feel deeply, but often keep it close to their chest, not because they're distant, but because they're private. Emotions aren't entertainment to them. They don't express just to be heard. They express when they trust. And that trust isn't given lightly. If an introvert opens up, it means you've become a safe place. They've decided you're worth the vulnerability. And when they give their heart, it's not to impress, it's to connect. Being with an introvert can feel calm. There are no fireworks every day. There are quiet evenings, thoughtful conversations, and peaceful silences. But in that stillness, there's something stable, something honest. They're not looking for constant stimulation. They're looking for someone who values presence over noise. They don't need grand gestures. They need consistency. They need to feel that you mean what you say, that you understand silence doesn't mean disinterest. It means comfort. They require space, not as a way to avoid you, but to recharge, to reset. Their mind never stops running. After a day full of conversations, noise, and decision-making, they need time to breathe. And if that space is respected, they return with more to give. Not everyone understands that. Some take it personally. Some think distance equals disconnection. But introverts don't pull away out of disloyalty. They pull back to stay balanced. The right partner learns to give them that space without guilt, knowing it's part of how they care. Introverts don't chase attention. They seek meaning. They want conversations that go beneath the surface, topics that stretch beyond the ordinary. They care more about how you think than what you wear. They're drawn to depth, to character, to authenticity. They find beauty in subtle things, a shared glance, a quiet understanding, a moment of honesty between words. That's their love language. Arguments may feel different with them. They may need time before responding, not because they're avoiding confrontation, but because they don't believe in shouting matches. They process slowly. They want to understand, not win. They will never enjoy fighting just to feel heard. They want communication to lead to healing, not more hurt. When they love someone, they don't want to harm them just to make a point. They speak with caution, not cowardice. Commitment isn't taken lightly. They're not quick to move on or easy to distract. Their loyalty runs deep. When they love you, they remember your struggles. They carry your worries with them. They don't forget what matters to you. Even if they don't say, "I love you" every day, they show it. Through protection, through consistency, through quiet support when the world feels heavy. They become your anchor, not loud, not flashy, but steady. Introverts are often misjudged in relationships. Some partners mistake calm for coldness, mistake solitude for indifference. But introverts aren't cold. They're warm in ways that take time to see. They need patience, not pressure, understanding, not assumptions. And when they find someone who sees that, who doesn't ask them to become someone louder, they flourish. They open up, they start to speak more, smile more, trust more, because they finally feel safe to be who they really are. Love with an introvert is steady and intentional. It's built on shared understanding, mutual respect, and emotional depth. There are fewer highs and lows, but far more stability, less noise, but more honesty. It's not always exciting by society's standards, but it's real. It's lasting, it grows stronger over time instead of fading. And when an introvert chooses you, it's not out of loneliness, it's out of certainty, because they've thought it through, felt it fully, and they're all in, quietly, but completely. Introverts often carry their quiet power into the workplace without asking for attention. After years of being misunderstood socially, they step into professional environments already conditioned to observe more than they speak. They aren't the loudest in meetings, they don't interrupt, they rarely dominate a room, but they notice everything: the dynamic, the tone, the body language, the silences between words. That quiet presence is often mistaken for passivity. But introverts aren't checked out. They're fully present, just not performing. In office culture, where visibility is often tied to voice volume, introverts get overlooked, not because they lack ideas, but because they don't push them aggressively. They think first, process, then speak. But by then, the louder voices have already moved on. It becomes frustrating to watch others get credit for surface-level thinking, while their own well-formed ideas remain unheard. It's not about ego, it's about contribution. They want to help, but they don't want to shout to be taken seriously. That's where the problem starts, because many workplaces confuse noise with leadership. Performance culture rewards the outspoken. Brainstorming sessions favor those who think aloud. Socializing after hours becomes a measure of team fit. And introverts? They quietly disengage from these unwritten rules, not because they're uncooperative, but because they're wired differently. They don't bond through banter. They connect through authenticity. They don't need constant group interaction to feel aligned. They just need to be respected for what they bring. Leadership is often seen as extroverted by default, bold, charismatic, loud, the person who rallies a crowd. But leadership can also be silent strength. It can be the manager who listens before deciding, the team lead who lets others speak first, then adds value with precision. Introverted leaders tend to be thoughtful, intentional, and emotionally intelligent. They're not chasing power. They're focused on impact. They ask questions that matter. They recognize effort others miss. They don't micromanage. They trust, and that trust builds strong teams. Still, most introverted leaders struggle to get there. They're often passed over in favor of those who appear more dynamic. Talent reviews can feel like personality contests. When promotions go to those who are more visible, not necessarily more effective, introverts retreat further. They question whether their way of working even fits, and that self-doubt becomes another barrier. But when introverts do lead, the results speak. They create calm in chaos. They build loyal teams. They set boundaries. They care more about outcomes than optics. Introverts thrive in roles where they have autonomy, where they can go away, think, build, then return with results. They prefer clarity over chaos, depth over pace, authenticity over performance. Jobs that give them space, remote work, focused research, design, writing, analysis. These become places where they quietly shine. They don't need daily applause. They need trust. They need space to think without interruption. They need work that aligns with purpose, not noise. They also excel in high-pressure environments, just not in the way people expect. They don't panic. They don't overreact. They hold space, think, decide. While others are overwhelmed by urgency, introverts create stability. That presence is rare, and once recognized, it becomes impossible to ignore. But recognition isn't always quick. Introverts must often self-advocate in systems that reward flash over substance. They learn to speak when it matters, to document their work, to let results build the case their voice sometimes can. Communication is another area where introverts differ. They prefer writing over speaking, emails over meetings, one-on-one over group sessions. It's not avoidance, it's efficiency. They know their words matter, so they use them carefully. They hate small talk, but they care deeply about real connection. That's why introverted leaders often build strong trust with individuals. They create safe spaces for team members to be heard. They don't talk over people. They don't take credit. They listen, then lift others up. But being in a loud work culture can drain them. Constant meetings, collaborative tools, and open author layouts leave no room to breathe. They start to shut down, not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed. And when they try to protect their energy, they're accused of not being a team player. So they push themselves, attend the calls, smile through the noise, and by the end of the day, they're completely drained, not from the work, but from the environment. That's why work-life balance isn't just a phrase for introverts. It's survival. They need time alone to reset. After a full day of social interaction, they crave silence. They don't always want to go out after work. They're not rude. They're recovering, and they shouldn't have to apologize for that. Boundaries are necessary. Saying no isn't rebellion. It's self-preservation. And when those boundaries are respected, introverts thrive. They bring consistency to the workplace. They don't make decisions based on mood or ego. They don't compete for spotlight. They let their work speak, and it does, over time. In a world obsessed with instant results, introverts play the long game. They build systems, solve problems others ignore, see patterns others miss. They don't talk about doing the work. They do the work. What they need most is understanding, not pity, not coaching on how to be louder, but recognition that their way works too. They don't want to be fixed. They want to be seen. A good manager understands this. A wise leader does too, because when introverts feel safe, they stop hiding. And when they stop hiding, they build things no one else can. That's the quiet truth no performance review ever measures, but every successful team eventually benefits from. Introverts are not broken. They are not cold, distant, or antisocial. But when you grow up in a world that rewards volume over depth, performance over presence, and speed over stillness, it's easy to start believing something is wrong with you. From classrooms to offices to family dinners, the world keeps telling quiet people to speak up, be louder, be more visible. And when you're constantly told you're not enough just as you are, it chips away at your sense of self, not because it's true, but because it's exhausting. To always be compared to something you were never meant to be. You begin to question your worth, not because you don't have value, but because your kind of value doesn't get loud applause. You're not the one leading the conversation. You're the one thinking 3 steps ahead, analyzing the room, listening to what people aren't saying. But that goes unnoticed. And over time, that constant misunderstanding turns into internal doubt. You start hiding parts of yourself. You show up, but not fully. You speak, but not honestly. You exist, but quietly, afraid that too much of you might still feel like not enough to everyone else. The hardest part isn't being quiet. It's being made to feel like your quiet is a flaw. People confuse silence with weakness. They think being soft means being incapable. They assume you're shy, awkward, uninterested, and all the while you're carrying a world inside, thoughts, questions, ideas, emotions, but there never seems to be enough space for it, so you keep it in, and that silence over time can begin to weigh more than words ever could. Being in environments that constantly demand noise can lead to something few people talk about: introvert burnout. Not the kind where you're just physically tired, but emotionally drained. Too many people, Too many expectations, too many conversations without depth. You start losing yourself in the noise. Long meetings, back-to-back interactions, crowded rooms. These aren't just uncomfortable, they're overstimulating. Your brain doesn't just process what's being said. It processes tone, body language, energy shifts, subtext. And it doesn't shut off when the conversation ends. You carry those impressions long after you've left the room. Social exhaustion for introverts is real, and it's not about disliking people. It's about the toll constant interaction takes on your nervous system. You need quiet to return to yourself. Time alone isn't avoidance. It's how you regulate. It's how you breathe again. But when the world doesn't understand this, introverts are often judged, misunderstood, or labeled antisocial. And when you start believing that label, anxiety creeps in. You push yourself to keep up, to smile more, to go out when your mind is begging for solitude. And slowly, you disconnect from your needs to meet someone else's expectations. It can become hard to even identify what you really want. You've been trying to be enough for so long that your own voice feels distant. You begin to fear the quiet you once loved because it now echoes with guilt. Guilt for saying no, guilt for staying in, guilt for not replying fast enough, guilt for protecting your peace. And yet, it's in that same quiet where healing begins, if you let it. There comes a point where you realize that pretending to be someone else just to feel accepted is the real burden. Not your quietness, not your stillness, not your need for space. It's the constant pretending that drains you. Self-worth doesn't grow in noise. It grows when you finally stop apologizing for your silence. When you stop explaining why you're not like them. You're not supposed to be. That's the truth. The world needs both, loud and quiet, fast and thoughtful, extroverted and introverted. The balance only exists when each part is allowed to exist without shame. Learning to accept yourself as an introvert means giving yourself the same compassion you give to others. It means honoring the way you process life. Some people recharge in crowds. You recharge in solitude. Some people speak to think. You think before you speak. Neither is right or wrong. It's simply different. The moment you stop forcing yourself to perform in ways that don't align with your nature, you'll start feeling whole again. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to have influence. You don't have to fill every silence with words to be present. And you definitely don't have to change who you are to be loved. The right people won't need volume to hear your value. They'll notice the way you listen, the way you think, the way you care without always needing to say it. Some of the strongest people speak the least. Some of the kindest don't say much, but their presence calms others. Some of the most creative minds don't work well in loud rooms. They build in quiet, dream in silence, and thrive in stillness. You are allowed to live like that too. The path to self-worth begins the moment you stop apologizing for what makes you different and start recognizing it as your strength. It's not about changing your nature. It's about understanding it, trusting it, and creating a life that supports it. There is nothing wrong with you. There never was. You've just been loud in all the wrong places. What you need isn't noise. It's permission to be exactly as you are. You've spent years thinking something was wrong with you, that your silence made you less, that your preference for solitude meant you were cold, disconnected, or strange. You watched louder people move through life like the world belonged to them. They were praised for their confidence, noticed for their voices, rewarded for their energy. And somewhere along the way, you began to wonder if quiet was a flaw, if being still made you invisible. if your slow, careful way of being would always leave you behind. But the truth is, you're not too quiet, you're not too reserved, and you're definitely not too much. You're also not too little. You're not lacking. You're not broken. You're just different. Your value isn't based on how loudly you speak, how many friends you have, or how often you attend every event. Your worth is not measured by how easily you fit into loud rooms. Some people shine best in silence. Some people light up, not by standing in the center, but by standing back and seeing what others miss. And that's you. You notice things. You feel things deeply. You reflect. You process. You listen. You remember details that others forget. You connect dots before others even notice they're part of a bigger picture. You think before you speak, and when you speak, it matters. You may not say much in crowded rooms, but the right people always remember your words, because they come from a place that's real, because they carry weight, because you don't use your voice to fill silence. You use it to speak truth. Some of the most impactful people in history were just like you. Albert Einstein, known as one of the greatest minds the world has ever seen, was quiet, thoughtful, and inward-facing. He once said, "The monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind." He wasn't chasing crowds. He was chasing truth. J.K. Rowling created entire worlds while sitting in a cafe, alone with her thoughts, writing stories that would later touch millions of lives. She didn't need a spotlight to begin. She needed space. Solitude gave her that. Rosa Parks didn't shout. She didn't lead with volume. She made history by sitting quietly, with courage, refusing to move. That act of still resistance shook an entire system. Elon Musk is often awkward in interviews, soft-spoken, rarely interested in impressing anyone. Yet he's building things that have changed how the world thinks about energy, space, and innovation. These names prove something loud and clear. Impact doesn't always come from noise. It comes from vision, from focus, from being bold in quiet ways. You don't have to become someone else to matter. You don't need to become louder to be taken seriously. You don't have to force your way into conversations where no one listens anyway. You need the right spaces, the right people, the right rhythm. You don't have to rush your words to match someone else's speed. Your timing is enough. You don't have to match their tone. Your calmness speaks its own language. There's room for your silence in this world. It just takes longer to find. But when you do, it fits better than anything you ever forced. You've probably been overlooked, talked over, misunderstood. Maybe you've been told to speak up or stop being so quiet, like it was a flaw to fix. Maybe you've watched less thoughtful voices get the recognition you quietly hoped for. That hurts. But it doesn't mean you're not capable. It doesn't mean your voice doesn't matter. It means the world isn't always built for your kind of power. But that's changing, and you are part of that change. You're not invisible. You're just not loud. You're not fading. You're just reserved. You're not running out of time. You're just moving at a pace that allows you to stay grounded. Some people speak before they think. You think long before you speak. That's not hesitation. That's wisdom. That's intention. And in a world that often favors fast reactions and constant stimulation, your quiet thoughtfulness is rare. It's needed. It's what people come back to when they're tired of noise. You weren't made to shout over the world. You were made to understand it, to question it, to reshape it, slowly, carefully, with things that last. And your path may be quieter, but it's no less important. The best builders lay foundations in silence. The strongest roots grow underground. You're not behind. You're preparing. You're becoming. And when it's your time to be heard, your voice will echo, not because it was loud, but because it was true. The people who truly see you won't ask you to change. They won't need you to perform. They'll understand the value of your silence. They'll know how to sit in it with you. They'll wait for your words. They'll respect your space. They'll admire your depth. Because when you finally speak, when you create, when you act, it will be with meaning, with purpose, with something that cuts through the noise. That's your way, that's your strength, and that's more than enough. They say, if you're not loud, you're not confident. If you're not constantly speaking, you're not involved. If you're not visible, you're not relevant. That's what the world wants you to believe. But you know better now. You've learned that quiet doesn't mean absent. It means present. Present fully, intentionally. It means you're thinking before you speak, feeling before you react, observing before you decide. That's not weakness, that's control. And not everyone has that. You've spent so much of your life being told to speak up, to be more outgoing, to talk more in meetings, to raise your hand first. And when you didn't, they labeled you as shy, awkward, or even rude. But they didn't see the thoughts running through your mind. They didn't know how much you noticed, how you read the room before stepping in, how you processed the moment before responding. You weren't missing, you were aware. And that awareness, it's rare. You used to wonder if something was wrong with you. Maybe you weren't bold enough. Maybe you lacked the confidence everyone else seemed to have. But the truth is, you were never lacking. You were just functioning in a system built for louder voices. You weren't less. You were just different. And that difference isn't a flaw. It's a strength disguised as stillness. You've come to understand your rhythm now. You don't rush. You don't chase noise. You value depth, not attention. You choose peace over popularity. You speak when it matters. You connect when it feels right. You walk away from shallow spaces that don't welcome the real you. And in doing so, you've reclaimed something the world tried to silence. Your right to be exactly as you are. Introversion is not a limitation. It's not a social flaw. It's not something to apologize for. It's a different way of being, a quieter form of intelligence, a softer kind of presence. And those who really see you, they don't need you to raise your volume. They feel your energy even when you say nothing. They understand your silence isn't empty. It's full of substance. You're not invisible. You've simply stopped performing. You're not behind. You've stopped rushing toward things that never felt right. You're not cold. You just protect your energy because you've learned how rare it is. You've spent enough time adjusting to others. Now it's your time to move in your own way, at your own pace, with your own values intact. You don't have to pretend anymore. You don't have to fake comfort in chaos. You don't have to chase circles that drain you. It's okay to stay home on a Friday night. It's okay to say nothing in a loud room. It's okay to be quiet when the world is shouting, because quiet doesn't mean absent. It means grounded. And grounded people don't just react, they build. You don't need to shout to make an impact. You don't need to compete for attention to matter. Being real is enough, and real always leaves a mark, long after the noise fades. Keep being you, quiet, thoughtful, steady. That's more than enough. That's power.